So now I'm going to show you how to measure and cut the panels. So what you want to do is measure the inside dimension of the system. The inside dimension of the system is the inside of the siding surface to the inside of the beam surface. So in this case, I've got 113 inches, the distance from the surface of the siding to the surface of the beam. From that measurement, I want to subtract 3 inches. Now the reason I want to subtract 3 inches is because I want to have room for the water to run off the edge of the pan and fall into the gutter. If my pan's cut way over here, there's very little room for the water to go into the gutter. So I subtract 3 inches, and that's where I cut. Now I'm going to show you how to cut the panels now that we know how long to cut them. So I'm going to mark it at 110 inches. You can cut panels with a miter saw. It does go a little faster. I'm going to show you how to do it with a snips and a utility knife here. So the first thing I do is I score the face of my panel, and I go ahead and snip the sidewalls. And the reason I score it is so that I can crack it in a nice straight line. Now, what I want to do on the high end of my panel is what we call box it up. And I do that by simply taking the knife, the snips, I cut away the flange on both sides. And I put a little 1/2 inch cut in the 90-degree bend at the bottom of the pan, and I take my hand seamer and I fold that up. I tap the 2 sides around. Now what I've done is I've created a little backsplash. So if in case the water for some reason wants to flow back up the pan, it's got this wall to hit and stop and redirect it down the panel. Now what I'm going to do at the opposite end is I'm going to put a little drip edge on it so that the water doesn't wick back underneath the panel and create a leak at the lip of the gutter. So again, I simply take my snips, I put a little 1/4 inch snip at that 90-degree bend, but this time I fold down. And now by folding down, I've created an edge where the water falls from when it gets over the gutter. Anytime that aluminum or copper or steel comes into contact with ACQ lumber, which is lumber that's been treated with copper acetate as a preservative, you need to put an insulator between the aluminum and the wood. So you simply take a piece of window tape, put it on the back side of the gutter, stick it on there before you attach that to the wood. That window tape will be the preservative, the barrier that breaks the chemical reaction between the aluminum and the copper acetate in the lumber. We're going to do that same thing on all our carriers wherever they come into contact with treated lumber. So I simply take a little 2x2 or 3x2 piece of my window tape, make a little skirt out of it, slip it right over the top of the carrier, and I put that and I stick that there before I put my screw in. Okay, now that we have one carrier up, what I'm going to show you is how to connect carriers. And when you connect carriers, what you have to do is use a splice. So when I cut my splice out, I'm going to find that little slot in the edge of the carrier. I'm going to cut to that slot on both sides. And then I just lift it and crack it out. I put that in my hand seamer, and I'm going to score it with my utility knife. Score it a couple times, then I'm going to crack those teeth right off. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Score it twice. And crack it away. And what I do is I take that and I compress it like this so that it will fit up inside the carrier itself. Once I've got that inside the end of my carrier, I'm going to slide it back and forth until these holes on the side line up. When I get those holes to line up, I go ahead and run a screw through both of them on both sides of the splice. That's what maintains the proper spacing between the teeth from one carrier to the next. The G-channel comes 10 feet long, so inevitably you're going to have to join pieces together. What I'm doing here is showing how G-channel gets joined together in the field. As you can see, I've made bird's beak cuts out of each of the angles on that G-channel all the way around. I take those cuts and I fold the tabs in, and that allows this piece of G-channel to fit into the one next to it. So I take my piece of G-channel that's been all bird's beak cut to fit, and I slide it right into the one next to it, and I get a nice tight fit. There are two products I recommend to seal the G-channel to the siding. The first one would be a good butyl-based caulk. You want to use a caulk that's going to stay flexible and that will hold its bond even when it gets wet. The second product you can use would be a butyl tape like this. As you can see, I've already put it on my G-channel. Comes with a paper separator that needs to get removed before it gets installed on the siding. So what I'm going to do is take my speed square, put a 45-degree angle mark with my pencil. I'm going to come all the way down and do that. You have to be careful as you bring your 45 miter down the face of this G-channel because the speed square doesn't stay on it. So you want to make sure that your 45 miter is a straight line. And then I just cut that out. And again, I'm doing that so that my side cap fits neatly into the G-channel in a nice mitered corner. After you cut that, you also want to make sure that you bring that little tab of metal back there, that little point, bring that up so that the side cap fits in there, and this holds your corner together. If I've got bolts on my beam that are holding the beam into the columns, a lot of times they're sticking out and the gutter won't lay over those nicely. So what I like to do is run my gutter either in between or above those bolts. Another object that might determine my slope would be either a window opening or a door opening on the wall, or maybe a light on the wall, and I want to make sure my G-channel is higher than that, or if I'm going to drain back to the house, that my gutter is higher than that. So what I like to do is I like to temporarily put a pan in and play with it, rock it back and forth, and make sure I'm going to clear my bolts on my beam and all the openings and objects on the wall that I want to avoid too. Now there's going to be other decks that are built without a beam out here, and the columns that support the deck just go right up to this rim joist right here, and there's no beam to put the gutter on. So if you're going to slope away from the house in that situation, you're going to have to add a board on the inside of those columns to attach the gutter to. The other choice is to slope back to the house, put the gutter on the house wall, and hopefully tie into an existing downspout that's taken water off the roof to drain the water out of your underdeck ceiling system. So what we're going to show here is the installation of a ceiling fan. As you can see, my electrician has left a feed wire here for me, so this is going to be the power supply to my ceiling fan. Homeowners decided they want to have the fan installed right here. So first thing we need to do is install a backing board that the junction box is going to hang from. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to attach this right to the bottom of my joist here, but the important thing to remember is that I'm going to be drilling through the panel rib into this board to bring the power line through, and so I want to make sure that this board is at the same elevation as the top of my panel rib right here. Now as you can see, we've already determined that this is the best location because the board's right on top of my panel rib there. So I'm going to go ahead and install this board. Now that I've got my backer board installed that my fan's going to hang from, I'm going to go ahead and put in my next panel. And with that panel up, I'm going to drill through the rib of the panel through my backer board, and that's going to be the hole that my supply power comes down through. All right, now you can see I've installed another panel. We've determined that this is where the ceiling fan's going to go. So now I'm ready to drill the hole that's going to be the access for the power supply. So I drill right through the rib of the panel and the board at the same time with about a 1/2 inch to a 5/8 drill bit. So now that I have my hole drilled, I'm going to go ahead and start feeding my power line down through here. And I'm going to push it all the way down till I can grab it on the bottom side like this. Now that I have enough to grab, I'm going to start applying caulk sealant to the top of my hole as I pull my wire through. And I keep applying caulk all around that wire. And what I'm doing is I'm letting the wire pull the caulk down into the hole. And this is how I make the waterproof the feed line. So I keep pulling this down till I can see caulk sealant coming out the bottom side at my wire here. So there's my caulk. So I'm going to stop. That tells me that the whole hole through the wood is full of caulk. I'm also going to take it and I'm going to apply a bead on the top side of my panel here as another seal. Okay, now as you can see, I've put in another pan and I'm ready to install the junction box for my ceiling fan. It's going to sit right below the pans, and I'm going to attach this junction box up through the rib just like I did for drilling the hole for the feed wire. So the next step is to go ahead and get a screw into that backer block. And as you can see, you don't want to over tighten it and distort the pans. You don't want to under tighten it and have your box flop around. Now it's ready for the electrician to come and attach the fan.